Can I welcome you all to the Education and Skills Policy Development Committee to be held today at Wednesday the 10th of February at 4 o'clock. Item 1, are there any apologies for absence?
Only from Councillor Generine at the moment, Chair.
Councillor Miles-Langston.
Okay. Thanks, Lynn.
Item 2, disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. Any? If not, we'll go on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which have been circulated. Is someone prepared to move the as a correct record?
Yeah.
Move, seconded.
Yeah.
All agreed. It was a fairly lengthy meeting, and I think we got through a lot of business in that meeting. So thanks go out to all the members who contributed, and also the officers as well for their very detailed input into that meeting. Before we come back to the agenda, I think we should congratulate Helen on her appointment as Director of Education for the City and County of Swansea. I was part of the process, and I know it was a well-deserved appointment, and we're lucky that we have the quality that we have of officers in the authority. So llongyfarchiadau Helen, edrych ymlaen at gweithio gyda chi yn y blynyddoedd i ddod.
Diolch yn fawr, Chair.
Which brings me to item 4, the main item on the agenda for this afternoon. Obviously, we are still in lockdown, and there were concerns at the last meeting about the impact this is potentially having on the most vulnerable learners we have in Swansea. And we asked the officers if they could gather the data and look at that specific group in readiness for this afternoon's meeting. So I know, Helen, you have a number of colleagues with you, but I'll call you first, and then if you want to introduce the item and call people in as we go along. You're on mute, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. So for the purpose of this afternoon's committee, we've invited a range of officers really that cover our vulnerable learners in Swansea. So the term vulnerable learner or vulnerable children in Swansea is quite a broad spectrum term. And we have a range of vulnerabilities in terms of additional learning needs and disabilities. We have vulnerabilities around emotional health and well-being. We have vulnerabilities around behaviour of our children. We have vulnerabilities in terms of the involvement with social services and child protection. We have vulnerabilities because we have looked after children in terms of our school population. So it's quite a broad spectrum term. So if we start with the field of ALN, we've got a colleague, our head of ALN and inclusion team is here, Alison Lane. And just before I ask Alison to speak, I'll just emphasise really that Alison has worked diligently during the initial lockdown period and currently is working to ensure that we have high aspiration for our additional learning needs pupils in Swansea. So I'll hand over to Alison for her to tell us what her team has done.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you for asking for feedback from us this afternoon. As Helen has pointed out, we've got a number of different areas of vulnerability within education, and I'm focusing mainly on ALN side this afternoon, but also the well-being agenda across the whole cohort of children across Swansea. So we're focusing on those two areas in my feedback to you today. We've, as an education service and the IT team, we have been supporting vulnerable children in a number of different ways and via a number of different audiences really throughout this time. Staff within the team have worked really closely with other service areas such as social services, health and the third sector to improve efficiency and effectiveness of how we can deliver the support at the right time by the right people and as soon as possible. So one of the main themes of that piece of work has been recognising the importance of staying connected and staying informed, and this has underpinned our work in this area. In relation to that, at a universal level, so this is covering all pupils and support for the whole population of learners across Swansea, guidance and advice has been provided for both parents, carers, children and young people and their teachers via the Swansea Virtual School. And each piece of that advice has been tailored to that particular audience so that it's age appropriate and in the correct context to ensure that those pupils are supported directly, but also that those around them are provided with support in order to ensure that their well-being and their needs are met during this really difficult period of time. Examples of the specific support has been and includes parental advice on managing the COVID crisis and how to support their children throughout it, bereavement and loss and how to manage that both from a parental's perspective as well as a school, and how teachers can manage those difficult times as well. And also the specific advice and guidance on supporting pupils who have neurodiversity and how they would manage this particular difficult time as well, and how the parents and teachers can support them effectively, be that at home or via an online learning platform as well. So that specific advice around the COVID situation. But in addition to that, we have provided online leadership training for staff and school leaders in order to support the staff within their school in managing this time and how they can support their learners within the school as well. Schools have been provided with enhanced training opportunities so that the staff within them have got confidence, knowledge, skills in supporting the learners. We've had a huge host of webinars, online training offers, opportunities, guidance documents, and in addition to that, regular links with central specialist staff such as learning support teachers, education psychologists, ALN caseworkers, behaviour support teachers and performance specialists for additional learning needs. So if there are any particular concerns about individual pupils or groups of pupils, then schools and parents can contact the whole range of the support services within the central team to have advice and guidance and support in managing those concerns at this time. In addition to that, we have the children and young people receive ongoing check-ins from the existing support network. So that would include the school pastoral teams, education welfare, social workers, early help workers and the third sector. And there are robust links and opportunities for all of those professionals to meet regularly and to share any concerns and identify any concerns and put in place actions to address those. Equipment, we recognise that for certain pupils with a specific additional learning needs, there's been a requirement to provide equipment at the home. For instance, for those pupils who have visual impairments or are deaf, they also need to have specialist equipment, and we've provided that equipment to ensure that at this time they're not disadvantaged and can access the support and learning tools that they require in order to access their education. Online consultations and assessments have continued throughout this period. They have included face-to-face assessments when required and when we have been allowed to do that. But we've also tried to maintain a level of service delivery via online consultation and assessments as well when the time hasn't permitted us to have those face-to-face meetings. Where emerging or exasperation of existing concerns are coming to light, these can be initial support can be provided by the school and can be escalated to our central services specialised staff for input, intervention and support. We continue to maintain business as usual as a service, so we are still accepting statutory assessment referrals, we're still undertaking the assessments, and we're still continuing with the statementing process. So all those learners who are struggling and whose needs are identified during this period of time, they would still continue to go through that process, so we are not losing any opportunities to support these learners. We have developed a really effective group with the emotional health and psychological well-being group. Helen Osborne, who's also with us this afternoon, is the principal education psychologist, who's one of the chairs of that group. It's a joint chair with social services, and that group brings together all relevant professionals to focus in on the psychological and emotional well-being of learners across Swansea. They have worked tirelessly and have been extremely effective in putting in place really timely interventions and support for our school population. We've had some increased investment from Welsh Government for emotional and psychological well-being, and it is this group that have planned and delivered an increased support package for learners across Swansea, and that includes enhancing the counselling service that's currently in place, so we've got an enhanced offer there, increased training, and also a support package from Crew's Bereavement. So they've, which has been extremely popular amongst our school population, and we've had, correct me if I'm wrong, Helen, I think we've had around about 5,000 hits on that, is it, or is that?
Yeah, that's the parental guidance on virtual school, and with the cruise training, there was a huge interest there. So we've actually put on more events so that we can meet the demand that's out there. Yeah.
Thank you, Helen. From a mental health standpoint, escalating concerns that have been raised are also being targeted via EPs, GPs and social workers who can access a new single point of entry and crisis line that CAMS have set up. So if they have concerns, they can go through the single point of access, discuss possible referrals into the CAMS service, and have either agreement on a referral or advice and support on how to support that learner at that time. There's I think the COVID situation has brought immense challenges, but I think it's fair to say that it's also provided increased opportunity and joint working, and I think that it has brought about the best in people of services working together for the greater good, and I just want to thank those my officers who have been involved in all of that, because I think that it's really proved that that joint working is everything really and we can meet the wide range of needs across Swansea. So thank you. Do you have any questions at all?
Well, thank you, Alison, and you've given us there a comprehensive account of the way the service has responded to this particular crisis and made sure that the learners' needs are at the centre of everything that's done. So I think that's extremely valuable evidence for the committee. I see a few hands up. I'll call Lyndon and then Mike Lewis first, please.
Thanks, Chair. Well done, Alison. I think what you say is right about the joined up service, because I've got an example of that in my ward, actually, where I actually spoke to social services and yourselves, and we got a really good resolution to that. So yeah, and that joined up service probably wouldn't have happened before. So I think that's probably one of the good things that's come out of this, where people have been in many ways forced, and we're all working together on that. And I think so well done, and certainly on the case in my particular ward. So thank you. Do you know what the when you say that obviously you've been giving advice to parents with children with additional learning needs and so on, what was the take up of the advice? Have we got any difficult to reach parents that we can't get? And is there a way that we can, I appreciate the difficulties, is there a way that we can get to those? Because sometimes they are obviously those are the children that we really need to help, and they're the most difficult to get hold of, and I think all of us would want to see them assisted. Thank you.
No problem. There are those hard to reach families, and I think that we've set up meetings certainly at the very start of the COVID crisis, and they continue to be monitored, where we have regular meetings with social services to identify those most vulnerable cases. And though that was identified from a social services perspective, but also ratified against school concerns and school leader concerns, that information was collected and informed us in how we target our support. And so that there was a targeted effort to engage with those families to get them either childcare placements, if need be, or to have that regular contact with the school and the pastoral support system within the school. So there's been a concerted effort, I would say, to engage with that population, which continues.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. And really, my question was very similar to Lyndon. We got this affinity for asking the same questions. But what I was concerned about was, have you had any problems getting access to these vulnerable children? That was my question, which is very similar to the one you've just answered. But when I say access, I mean that when you've gone to go face to face, or you try to get them on the phone, you can't meet them, and there's no answer at the door. What's the situation then?
I would say the majority of those learners are known to social services in relation to their vulnerability, and so they have regular contact and have in-depth support from their social worker. But through our increased links and discussions between the two services working very closely together, if the social workers are struggling to engage, we then are able to pick up from an education perspective and target those children there. There aren't learners that have been lost, that they have been identified and targeted, and intense support put in.
Can I just clarify, when you said that they're known to they've got social services involvement, is that the ones the most difficult to get hold of, or is it all group in the that you've been working with?
In terms of vulnerability, sorry, Helen, did you want to come in? Or?
Yeah, I'm wondering if I'd be most useful in answering the question. So when we originally RAG rated all the vulnerable learners in Swansea in the first lockdown, we had obviously a list of the ones facing the most risk, and the ones who had red rated usually were known to social workers and were at the sharp end of things, and we were really concerned about them. But during the course of that lockdown, and as the disruption of education kind of increased, and it was almost a 6-month period initially, wasn't it? We did ask schools to reconsider other children that maybe wouldn't have been on the red, amber or green list originally, but now we're starting to cause them a bit more concern. And we did end up with over 3,000 names across our schools on that list. And it's those emerging vulnerabilities that we are interested in continuing to monitor, because the ones who are known to us have already got agencies working, in partnership to make sure they're catered for. It's the unknowns, isn't it? The ones that haven't been seen in school, but their domestic situation potentially is not a good one for a variety of reasons. What we do in education is we receive contacts from the South Wales Police in terms of domestic abuse. So any child who has heard or seen domestic abuse between adults in the household is actually recorded. That information is shared with the education department. So for January, for example, we had 130 contacts between South Wales Police and the education. So in Swansea, there were 130 cases where these children had been privy to some cases. And I'm not saying they're all new cases. They could have been, existing cases of domestic abuse. But certainly we are asking schools to be vigilant in terms of the contacts they have. We are asking them to consider really the mental health and well-being continually really of children who don't engage online. And the ones where, they know they're not in front of the screen, for example, if they're a certain age, there's an expectation if you're in secondary school that you have a number of live lessons every day now. And it's those who aren't engaging, hopefully we can see a pattern, and schools through their pastoral leads will pick these emerging vulnerabilities up as well.
Thanks, Heather, because I was part of that discussion over the summer, as you know, and it's reassuring to know that we are talking about that broader group, the 3,000 you mentioned, because I think that is crucial that we extend this and make sure that the net is sufficiently wide to capture them as well and meet their needs. Des, sorry, I kept you waiting. You're on mute, Des.
Okay, I'm using the camera through one device and the mic through another device, so excuse me. I think we're all concerned about the vulnerable learners, aren't we? I mean, that's obvious. And the safest place for many of these children is when they're in school. So we need to get these children back in school as soon as possible. With the schools now beginning to open, slowly, surely, can we make moves to get as many of these vulnerable children back in as it's possible to do so?
Sorry, it's catching, isn't it? I'll come in and answer that. Obviously, it's a welcome return for the 3 to 7-year-olds the week commencing the 22nd of February. That's really welcome that the young ones are coming back into our schools. But we can only do so when it's safe, and when the clinicians and scientists tell us that the community transmission, the pressure on the NHS, a number of factors have to be in place before other year groups are considered. So, we welcome any scientific evidence that supports the return of children of all year groups coming back. And we hope that work at a national level continues so that we can use that really as the premise to return to schools. So the vulnerable children who have received on-site learning since Christmas are obviously part of the vulnerable children cohort who are most at risk. So we really need to see them. We need to have eyes on them, and we need to make sure that they are continually being seen on site. It's probably not safe that they are dealt with otherwise. But yes, absolutely right, Councillor Thomas. We need to see these children back as time has increased. We've got concerns about mental health and well-being. A lot of statistics published recently, particularly around girls' mental health and well-being, of that kind of teenage year group as well. Very concerned about some of the emerging statistics. It's also, it's not just depression and anxiety in children and young people. It's the demotivation, it's the disengagement, the disaffection. They're losing potentially the aspiration. So we need to get them back in to try and support them with their futures, definitely.
Sorry, Mike, did you want to come back?
No.
Sorry.
Your legacy, Anderson. Okay.
Can I just? I'm
As I
the governor
pressed
of
the
2
button,
primary schools.
so it
and
was discussed.
during the
So
last
no problem.
during the last lockdown, one school was catering for 7, 8, which seems to be the average. The other one was catering for 50 pupils. Now, being the suspicious person I am, I tend to think that some of the parents of the 50 children were using it as a child-minding service. I may be wrong, but I'd far sooner see vulnerable children taking those places than us being a child-minding service for others.
What's happened since Christmas is really welcomed in the sense that every school now provides its own on-site learning for vulnerable children, whereas in the first lockdown we had this concept of a hub. So there was, sometimes there was no control really in terms of what was happening across different settings. But now every setting, every school really is expected and it's regulated. It's underpinned by a regulation really that expects that vulnerable children are receiving on-site learning within their own school. So that is very much welcome. So, we're making sure really that the vulnerable children especially are seen within their own school.
Sam?
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the point. It's already been stated, but I think it's a really important point about how, for the most vulnerable children across Swansea, one of the most crucial links is that between children's services, between social services and education. And I think that over this period, it's been incredibly refreshing and incredibly encouraging to see that link strengthened between social services and education. And I think that increased link is hopefully, when COVID is hopefully defeated, not many things will remain. But that's something I think, in that working practice between the two departments, I think is something that would be really welcome to continue, because I think it's, everything's been stretched. Teachers have been stressed, council staff have been stretched. But in this area, I think we've actually improved on the norm. Everybody's saying, oh, there's chaos everywhere. But I do think that on this particular issue, the two departments are working simultaneously much better. And what that does mean is better outcomes for the most vulnerable children in Swansea. And I think that's been very clear to see, particularly from social service perspective. And I do think it's worth drawing the committee's attention to that. And long may it continue. But I think that is one of the key reasons why vulnerable children have been protected to such a degree in Swansea.
Yeah. I think you're right, Sam. And this is something which I know we as elected members have been pushing for years and arguing for, and it's not just us across the whole of Wales. This has been an important agenda. And I think, you know, if that is one of the outcomes of the 6 months, 9 months we've been through, then there will be something positive coming out of it. I agree with you. Helen, do you want to come in on that?
Sorry, just to welcome those comments, Councillor Pritchard, because it's incumbent upon us really to pool our resources and to work towards the same goal, which is the safety and the ability of children to thrive and young people to thrive in Swansea. That's absolutely our common ground. And it's not to say that we are still working through some barriers, but at least there's an honest brokering, there's some honest dialogue between departments saying what the issues are, and we're working our way, we're finding solutions to those problems together. And rather than just moan about things not being synchronous, we're actually working together to make it better. So I do welcome that approach, and I hope it's a long-standing way of working in an integrated way. We have got other colleagues that have joined us, Chair, in terms of other vulnerable children. And I know that Amanda Taylor, as head of the Pupil Referral Unit, has hopefully been able to join us this afternoon. So we have a new Pupil Referral Unit called Maestero in Swansea, and Amanda's with us as head teacher. And of course, there is a cohort of very vulnerable children in Swansea, and their well-being is of paramount concern to us in terms of their engagement in learning. So I'll just hand over, and hopefully Amanda's got the right connectivity and the Wi-Fi is installed properly in the new building, because she's joining us today from Maestero.
Thank you, and welcome to the committee, Amanda.
Diolch, thank you. Not quite got the Wi-Fi. They're working on it as we speak. So I'm on my phone. So apologies if it's not great. Please let me know if you can't hear anything. But I am sitting in the new building with staff busily putting things out of boxes and onto shelves and setting up classrooms. So we've handed over the keys today for Step Ahead and moved everything out. So an exciting time. I suppose just to update on where we are and what we've been doing for the young people specifically, as well as preparing the building in readiness for transition. And we will be starting an early transition back to face-to-face learning for all of our young people. So we'll be starting that after half term, starting with our year 11 learners who we've been maintaining face-to-face teaching throughout, obviously because of the vulnerability around their leaving school with appropriate qualifications. So we'll be starting with them immediately after half term, and the following fortnight, 2 weeks after, we'll be bringing in our primary, a week later bringing in Key Stage 3, and then we'll be reviewing our Key Stage 4 that are currently in Brondeg, only because of the date that will likely take us to, and the risk that if we try to move them at that point, our year 11 learners may think, well, there's no point and we're not going to bother going. So we've agreed that we'll almost keep in abeyance the opportunity to keep Brondeg open until certainly the end of June for them, so we can continue their learning there if that's what they prefer. But we'll give them a voice in that, because we have got one or two that are quite keen. They've been invested in the building, they've designed logos, they've supported the development of the new name. So we know that we will have some who are keen to come over. So we'll have a very bespoke approach to those young people. Throughout, as I said, we've been teaching our year 11 learners, and we've had a reasonably good uptake of up to 60% attendance every day for those learners. Quite pleased with that. And numbers where they can't, it may be individuals that are vulnerable and self-isolating and shielding themselves, they aren't able to, or they're living with older family members who are shielding and the family have decided not to engage. But in addition to that, we've had synchronous learning ongoing and timetabled lessons for young people to engage with. Greater success in engagement with our children who've got mental health anxiety, as opposed to the children who have got a behavioural difficulty. And we've really looked at that and tried to unpick from a research angle as to why certain children are engaging with synchronous learning over to others. And actually, it's what we've noticed is for those young people with mental health and anxiety, issues. And we've also got a couple of young people who are selective mutes. The medium of actually learning through an online platform is more aligned to what they prefer to do in their own time in terms of online playing games. It also takes away that need for face-to-face contact, so it removes the anxieties around that, and it reduces some of the social anxieties they have in groups. So for some of our young people, it's actually supported them. And then with our young people who are selective mutes, the ability to feed via the chat, again, is something that they're familiar with and they're confident in doing. So they've been able to engage in that way. The negative side of that will be re-engaging back in face-to-face learning. And that's why we've tried to maintain that balance, because we don't want them to become too accustomed to synchronous learning, because actually it suits some of our children very, very well. We've then provided an offer of face-to-face learning for about 20% of our young people who are in year 10, who are vulnerable in Brondeg with significant challenge behaviour. And we've also maintained the opportunity for them to engage in some vocational work. So we've managed to keep one of our external providers open so that they can provide their vocational courses and continue with that, which has given them an additional face-to-face learning opportunity. And in Arvin, where we cater for primary and Key Stage 3 pupils, we've had an offer for those that we've identified as vulnerable, and then we've got childcare. Very low uptake from primary children, which we thought would be higher. So we've got any given week only 1 or 2 children accessing childcare from primary, but a higher number coming in from Key Stage 3, which is different from the last lockdown, which has been interesting. In terms of vulnerability, we learned from last time, and we reviewed our whole structure, our team structure, and as part of our wellbeing team. So whilst we recognised that we had a very small number of young people that were classed as red from our social services list, in knowing those children and knowing the vulnerabilities, we knew there was a much higher number that potentially the lockdown would give them the opportunity to become more at risk than they already were. So we've RAG rated all the children, and we've basically got it splits quite evenly into 30% that went into the green category, 30% went into the amber category, and then 40% went into our red category. And what we've done is in addition to having the teaching through remote learning, through face-to-face, and we deliver paper packs for those that can't access online or choosing not to. One example of that is we've got one young man who lives with an elderly gran. Elderly gran makes sure he gets through his paper pack of work very, very well. I'm considering offering her a job because I think he does more work for gran than he does for us. But what we've tried to do is base our understanding of children's needs, how they work, how families can support them and support them through their learning in that way. So they have an ongoing contact with their teacher, their form teacher. They have ongoing contact with their subject teachers for the older children, where anything to do with their learning, they can contact them via email. They have Teams. We have a Teams page that they can post things on. We can post things on. But in addition to that, we've given every single child a key worker to look very, very specifically at their wellbeing needs. So our children who are in that green category have a key worker that come from our level 4 TAs, who we've brought into the wellbeing team, given them some additional training, and they support. So those children get between 1 to 3 calls a week from their wellbeing key worker to support them and to support the families. So the call in that instance is usually to the parent or the grandparent or the key carer, to support their needs, to check on how they are, how they're doing, have they got any needs. And sometimes it may be or they're struggling with an aspect of learning, and that message will go back to the teacher. That's allowed us to keep a watching brief. For our children who are on the amber and the red lists, they've actually got a support worker who work with a wellbeing plan, and they've done an assessment using the wellbeing plan for that assessment. So we've aligned our plans with social services as much as possible, and they have between a daily to 3 times a week call. If we don't get hold of parents, we do doorstep visits, so we know where those young people are and what's happening. We also do doorstep visits if there have been any key issues. So, for example, over the weekend, we had a young man who went missing from the care home that he was residing in, and we then do the doorstep visits to make sure things are all right, think that he's all right, the situation is okay. And we've maintained that ongoing communication and regular meetings via Teams with colleagues in CAMS, social services and early help hubs around them. And that team will escalate then if we've got any children who we've identified as in need, whilst they will hold the wellbeing plan and do the work with the parents. Where we feel that it becomes a safeguarding need, and they'll escalate that through to social services. So we're able to do that very quickly at the point of need. We've learned in terms of the needs of parents, and we've worked with Aero and taken some advice from Esting colleagues as well, that for a lot of our children, we can't give them digital devices because of their vulnerability and how they would use the devices. So, for example, we've got some young people who, because of their risk of sexual exploitation, they're not allowed to have those devices. But what we've done is we've tried to identify those young people who we think, if there was the support from home, they would be able to access it. So we've created a digital family network where we've been able to apply for some funding to provide a device not to the child but to the parent or the caregiver in the context that they are in, but also then to do some work and training. So we've worked with Aero, who'll be providing training. Because I went back over Hub, and we use Hub all the time in schools, and that's the platform that our children are learning on. But Hub has evolved over a couple of years, and when you go back in after quite a short period of time, you look at it and think, oh my God, how much is on this, and how do I navigate it now? So for a parent who's never had that experience of navigating it, it can be quite daunting. So the training will be that they can navigate Hub, and they can adequately support their child to actually navigate it, but equally that they can keep that young person safe online. So that's in the very early stages. What we've identified are 3 family network champions that will do that work. Very small groups, so they get a very bespoke offer of support. But what we're also hoping then as well is that that network will allow the family members to actually talk about the issues that they are facing, living with a young person that's got challenging behaviour or mental health needs, and that they can continue that when there aren't professionals there, so they can continue the network that they make with other parents and carers to discuss it without professionals, in an honest and open way, to say, well, what do you do when this happens, without the feeling of being judged, because very often our parents feel judged by other parents who aren't in the same situation. Any questions, really?
Well, just a comment. I know. Thank you again for giving such a comprehensive overview, and it's gratifying to know that these comprehensive services were able to be provided under the circumstances. So, that is good news. Are there any comments or questions from members of the committee?
Very interesting report, though. Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd echo that. There's Lyndon, you've got your hand up.
I would say really, really well done, really, for the services that you are providing. It's excellent. And another thing probably that's come out of this is the fact that you are able to pull people together via Teams, whereas it would have taken you a lot longer if you were to get an actual meeting together, everybody driving down to the Guildhall or whatever else to hold that meeting, and you've been able to pull those together. But really well done, and also involving parents in the way and carers in the way that you have as well, which I think is really important and innovative as probably as well. So thanks for what you're doing, and good luck with everything at Maestero.
Diolch. And I'd say our relationship with parents has probably strengthened. That's been one of the advantages of COVID, because our children normally are taxied in, and very often the relationship we have with parents is when they come to meetings, which are quite formal, or when we're ringing them up to say that something's gone wrong. Or, I mean, we have had a focus over the last couple of years of making sure we ring parents with good news, but it tends to be for a very specific reason that we're having that meeting or having that discussion. Whereas we learnt very early on from the initial lockdown with the delivery of free school meals, how much parents appreciated the chance to just have a chat and talk about things that were happening and maybe offload. So we used that in terms of how we built the sort of support around them for this time. And, you know, by and large, most parents have said that they've been very appreciative of that, and we felt we've benefited. If we've got to know the parents and the family, the context that that child is living in far better. And I think the relationship and that trust has grown as a result.
I know it offers a way of working in the future. I would have thought, new way. These are new ways of working moving forward, aren't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in the building, we've got a lovely community room right at the front, where we plan to do, we haven't had the facilities previously, but we've now got the facilities where we can do more active work with parents, but more social work as well. You know, having them round for a cup of tea, getting the children to make a little afternoon tea or a breakfast, and sitting together as families and talking, as opposed to formal meetings. So I'm really looking forward to that. But then also offering some courses and training for them based on what their needs are, listening to them, finding out what would be useful, and then putting that on.
I can't see many councillors, to be honest, because I haven't got them on the screen. Does anyone else want to come in at this point? Say now or forever keep your peace.
There's no hands up, Chairman.
No hands up, okay. Helen, do you want to come in, come back?
Yeah, just to give my thanks to officers who've given their time to come here today, really, to speak. Some of our work is quite pressurised, and we're grateful for the opportunity to produce verbal reports, but I am aware, as in a previous PDC, some of the officers have actually written some of their notes down in order to present. So we will share those with Gareth Bosden to make sure that some of the key points are captured as well. One thing I would like to say in terms of a summary in terms of mental health and well-being, there's a national expectation that our schools really have a whole school approach to mental health and well-being going forward. And this has never been more important given the after effects of COVID really, and what it's potentially going to leave as a legacy. So I think in terms of our recovery, which is part of the work of the PDC as well, to look at how we recover in education, I think ensuring that schools develop their whole school approaches to mental health and well-being consistently and with good quality across Swansea is going to be a strong imperative going forward.
Any questions, any comments on that? If not, it's going to take us nicely to the next item on the agenda, which is the work plan for the committee. Again, I'm conscious of the pressure that's on the department, especially now with planning for schools to go back. So what I would suggest is that we use the next session to take stock of the evidence we've gathered in this meeting and in the January meeting, and I would use that for a discussion with you, Helen, about what we feel are the priorities and not just the learning points, but also the what needs to be put in place and what needs to change and be consolidated to help Swansea move forward effectively in future and to capture the learning from this terrible 9 months that we've all been through. And we'll do that at the March meeting with a view then of having ideas that will eventually form their way to a cabinet report when there's capacity to deliver them. I know if other members are happy with that kind of approach, I think it's, it'll capture what we've learned, but it'll also take account of the capacity issues within the department and within the council generally at this point. Are members happy with that approach?
Yeah,
The ones I can see are nodding anyway.
Yeah, fully agree with that, Chair.
Okay. We'll just like to summarise them by thanking the officers and councillors who've been present this afternoon. But it's, you know, it is good to know what's been going on and the way the council has been able to respond and support our learners and support the practitioners in such a difficult time. And I think, you know, that there are positives coming out of this as well as coping strategies, and I think that's something we need to bear in mind. Mike, you want to come in?
Yeah, so just to thank Helen for coming along this afternoon and giving us an overview of what's going on, because I know she's very busy at this point in time, but just to give her all our thanks for appearing here this afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah. I'd like to second that, Rob. There's a lot of good work going on. The people don't realise how much work is going on in the background. So well done, everybody. And thank
Absolutely.
you.
Des?
Yeah, just leading on from that, the contact I've had with teaching staff are full of praise for the education department and the support they've been given over this uncertain period of time. So it's good that it's, you know, being felt within the wider family of the education service.
Lyndon?
Yeah, I'd echo what Des has just said, because if you speak to teachers, they wouldn't necessarily know who the interim director of education, now our director of education, is, and they do because you've been in contact with them again using Teams and everything else. And you know, that communication is almost instant, isn't it? Really, and it's been well received, and it's a question of they like their independence, but great to have somebody holding their hands and pointing them in that direction as well. And that has certainly been the case with you. And I'd like to congratulate you on your appointment as well. And I've been on a number of meetings recently, and your knowledge, I have to say, on almost everything is second to none. So really well done.
Amazing.
Just to come back, I just want to say, not for my benefit, for all the officers in our department, your words of encouragement and kindness make a difference. They keep us motivated. So thank you very much.
Yeah. And I know, you know, everyone who's been involved has gone the extra mile in the last 9 months. And I don't think Swansea will be in the position it's in now if our officers and the staff in the schools, the teachers, TAs and everyone else wouldn't have done that. And I think that's something we need to recognise moving forward as well. So I think the next meeting is 4 o'clock on Wednesday, the 10th of March. And we'll be about a quarter of the way through the new year by then. So the time is moving on, yeah. But in the meantime, can I thank you all for your attendance and again for your valuable contributions this afternoon. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.